Thank you, Carrie. I'm now honored to introduce the moderator and panelists of this morning's first session, addressing the new landscape of college sports. To my immediate left, our moderator is Jim Trotter. Jim is an award-winning journalist, author, and lecturer, and the 2023 National Association of Black Journalists Journalists of the Year. In 2024, in the wake of a legal settlement against the NFL for racial discrimination and retaliation, he created the Work, Plan, Pray Foundation, providing scholarships for journalism students at HBCUs, including Howard University. To Jim's left is a former Division I volleyball player at Georgetown. We are so honored to have the United States representative for the 3rd District of Massachusetts, a leader of the Democratic Women's Caucus, and member of the House Committee on Energy and Commerce, which is in the midst of seeking a legislative solution to the current chaos in college sport. With us this morning, we welcome the Honorable Lori Trahan. To the Congresswoman's left is Ross Dellinger, senior writer for Yahoo Sports, whose X feed is my first read every morning. Ross is a great resource and writer, providing invaluable insights into the entire landscape of college sports, including policy matters beyond football. To Ross's left is Bob Philp, Vice President and Head of Athlete Relations for Pathway Sports and Entertainment, a new and dynamic force redefining the landscape for college athletes, forging innovative pathways that empower athletes to thrive through transparent and recurring commercial group licensing opportunities. Mr. Trotter, it's all yours.
Thank you. I'm going to turn this way so I can see everyone. First, I want to say thank you for being being on with such an esteemed panel. There's a lot to get to here. We have a short amount of time. So I wanted to start with Ross, basically, because this has been an incredible week. When you talk about a hearing on the proposed House settlement out in Oakland, California, then a hearing on Capitol Hill on Tuesday, and then yesterday being the NCAA pushing the College Sports Day on Capitol Hill. So can you give us a 30,000-foot view of where we are right now in all of this in terms of what's going on with proposed changes to college athletics?
Yeah, it has been I'm still recovering from the red eye back from Oakland from the hearing on Monday night. And it's been one after another this week. Like you said, it's been a lot, but it's been a lot for 4 years. I feel like I go back to the COVID year, 2020, and there really hasn't been an off season college sports, college football. There's been a lot of changes. So, I'll just like take each of these things maybe individually, and kind of give you an overview. On Monday with the House settlement hearing in Oakland, and basically the judge didn't do much really unexpected. I think there was an expectation that she was moving toward approving the House settlement. She made that clear that she wants to approve the House settlement. But she also made clear something that was expected in that she thinks she made recommendations of changing certain things. And the biggest of those changes would be changing the roster, phasing in or grandfathering in current players who are on rosters. The House settlement comes with people kind of overlook the roster part of the House settlement, but there's the back pay, then there's the revenue sharing going forward, but there's also the roster limits, the new roster limits, which would lead to 5,000 to 10,000, I think, estimated Division I players cut from rosters because it trims down on roster length. So most of the objectors that were there in Oakland were objecting to the roster limits, not really a whole lot else. And she didn't entertain any of the other objections except for basically the roster limits, which was a little surprising. So now the decision is for university presidents and conference commissioners of the power conferences. Do you phase in roster limits like she wants? And if they decide to do that, it seems like she's going to approve the settlement. If they decide not to do that and call her bluff, it'll be interesting to see what she does. So that's the House settlement portion. What happened yesterday on the Hill, and it's still happening today, is around 150 to 200 athletic directors, coaches, and athletes are up here meeting with their lawmakers, trying to convince them to pass a bill. We're on year 5 of this lobbying effort. They have been close to in the Senate to producing a bill a couple times. They're close again. They've never gotten it over the finish line, even just producing a bipartisan, all encompassing bill. So,
Well, for the audience, what exactly are they seeking?
yeah, three main things. Well, one, they want to codify the settlement.
Right.
That's the term they used, which is another term, as the Congresswoman probably knows, to an antitrust exemption. Because if you codify the settlement, you protect them, you give them protection from other legal challenges, and you give them protection to enforce their rules. So that, well, number one, that's what they want. Number two, they want an anti-employment clause in a bill where college athletes are deemed students and not employees. And so those are really the two main things. I'm missing the last one. Congresswoman, what am I missing here? There's a third.
Gotten big.
Yeah,
Become a conference commissioner wish list, I think.
yeah, there's a lot of asks and requests of Congress right now. And that's part of what's been, and the congressman could probably speak to this, what's been one of the issues is that there's a laundry list of things that's needed, and different conferences come in with different things they need.
Right.
So a lot of times everybody's on the same page, and that's kind of created hurdles, I think. Only recently in the last year, maybe 6 months, has everybody kind of got on the same page. And I think they have because of the settlement. I think they have. So that's what they want. And we'll see. I don't know if we're going to get some bill tomorrow or next week. Ted Cruz is working with Cory Booker and some others in the Senate on a bill. And I think the commissioners met with both of them yesterday, trying to push it across the finish line.
It's great to have a congresswoman on the panel with us here to address some of this. Is there a role for Congress in this from your perspective?
So first, thank you for having me. It's great to my operating environment these days is chaos. So it's nice to take a break from that and come and talk about one of my favorite policy areas, which is the future of college sports and sports in general. Yeah, there is a role. I think with NIL and the patchwork of state laws, that's really created a tough environment, not just for schools, for athletes. If I go back to when I was 17 years old, signing my letter of intent, if I had to sort of also factor in what an offer from Chapel Hill with different NIL, regulations versus Georgetown. My parents didn't go to college. I was the first person in my family to graduate from college. That would have been daunting. And it's daunting for athletes, which I'll just take a step back. I think the voices that are often missing when Congress is getting all of these fly-ins are the voices of athletes. Why? Well, athletes don't have the resources to break from school and collectively come down and talk to lawmakers about what they want to see in a sports package. I get plenty of incoming from conference commissioners and athletic directors and university presidents. But when I asked Chase Griffin to come and testify in front of the Energy and Commerce Committee, he had to pay his own way. There was nobody helping him get here so that the athlete's voice could be heard. And so, for me, I constantly come back to my North Star, which is what is best for the athletes and how do we ensure that their voice is at the table. And I do think Congress can play a role on having a federal standard on NIL that has grown into a much larger bill. I think we started there 4 years ago, and clearly there's some things that we could take into account given that NIL has been around now for 4 years. There's issues with collectives and transfer portals, but where Congress should play is much more limited than I think what we're seeing right now in many of these proposals. And so I sort of look at it from that perspective. I am not interested in rolling back the progress that athletes have made as a result of NIL. I am not interested, and I have to stop some of my colleagues from going back to this nostalgic view of, amateurism and college athletics and say, look, this is a better product across the board. Hello, I didn't go to San Antonio. I was in Tampa watching the women's final.
There you go. There you go.
And by the way, I mean, athletes not at the table, but women, I'm here to be the voice for strengthening, making sure Title IX is strengthened for the next 50 years, making sure that, even when we talk about the House settlement, that, women aren't this 5% going forward, right? Because that was not, that whole settlement was predicated on women's sports not having promotions and marketing and media deals. So, we have to, if we're going to legislate, we have to take into account the progress athletes have made, not roll that back, and not do anything to, sort of lock in where athletes can kind of benefit in college sports. So I do think that there's a role for Congress to play. As I watch the package develop in the Senate, I think it's going to be hard for that to be a bipartisan, deal, just because it's in my view, it's too broad.
I think it's great you brought up Title IX. I know you played Division I volleyball. I had a daughter who played Division I field hockey. And as I look at the proposed settlement in terms of back pay, 90% of that nearly $3 billion would go to men.
Yeah.
And there are some who are trying to apply that formula to revenue
University of
sharing,
Georgia.
yes, going forward. So what I was curious about in terms of Title IX violations, there has never been a case where the federal government has withheld funding for Title IX violations. And as we look at today's climate, where this administration is trying to dismantle the Department of Education, where the Office of Civil Rights is being limited, who's going to enforce Title IX going forward if there are violations?
So I probably should have started my comments in terms of the broader context, which we're talking about a sports package, because this administration is dismantling the Department of Education. My Fair Play for Women Act is aimed at getting rid of those loopholes so that many, many more women have the opportunity to play college sports. But that legislation is null and void if there is no enforcement arm for Title IX. So it's the backdrop of this really is a tough one. And, I know that Senator Cruz and, many in the sports, in the college sports, stakeholder group, look at this as an opportunity to get something done, right? There's Republicans in the majority of the House, the Senate, and the White House. And so this is like their moment. But I got to be honest, I mean, there's Medicaid, in my committee, the committee I sit on, Energy and Commerce, that's where sports legislation will sort of get figured out on the House side. But it's also where, Republicans are aiming to cut nearly $1 trillion out of Medicaid, getting rid of, so many investments. And so you have to step back and say, is this what voters want us to be working on right now? As someone who does town meetings every time I go home, this is not something that comes up. And so people are scared about their Social Security, scared about tariffs, scared about high cost. And so, as the Department of Education is getting sort of dismantled, I do think about the enforcement of Title IX, but many other people are thinking about, are we still going to offer education to kids with disabilities? Are we still going to be able to have the same funding streams, making sure that every kid, no matter their zip code, gets, access to a high quality public education? So that's sort of the the challenge right now of doing something meaningful on college sports is that, there's so many other things that are kind of burning down.
No, I fully understand it. I just find it when they try and apply an antiquated model to what's happening now, and we look at the popularity of women's sports now, particularly the women's Final Four, which a year ago outdrew the men by what, roughly 4 million viewers, I believe. So to try and apply that standard going forward, to me, seems ridiculous.
When the House settlement came out, we were very quick to send a letter to the Department of Education, just getting on the record of how damaging this would be for those ratios, right? 75% football, 15% men's basketball, 5% women's basketball, 5% everybody else, right? That's the breakdown. How damaging and antiquated that would be to be forward looking for future, direct payments to athletes. And so the last administration did give guidance basically saying that was based on a time where there were no media deals, there were no promotion of women's sports. And so while it can, it shouldn't be forward looking, it was one of the first things that this administration rescinded before their dismantling of the department. And so I think that tells you a lot about how, this administration, this Republican majority is thinking about how women are going to factor in at a moment when everyone is watching women's sports, right? I mean, women have on their own produced incredible organic growth in their sports and across the board, not just in women's basketball, women's softball, 92,000 fans at Cornhusker Stadium watching a volleyball game. I mean, I'm 30 years out of college volleyball, but I could have never imagined that kind of fan turnout for a volleyball game. And so why would we thwart that excitement, that nurturing of more younger women fans and getting into sports? It's outrageous. So we're gonna stay on this, making sure that regardless of what happens with the House settlement, that it doesn't apply, as the University of Georgia has already indicated. And when asked about this on our panel a couple of months ago, we didn't really get good answers. So I definitely think that is a place for, my voice anyway, making sure that not just athletes are at the center, but we are not rolling back all the progress that women have made in competitive sports.
Bob, I haven't forgotten about you down there.
Good.
There's just so many important legal issues as this goes forward. You spent basically a quarter of a century dealing with talent relations, negotiations, those sorts of things. I wonder, from an athlete's standpoint, it's great that these opportunities are now there for athletes to capitalize on their name, image, and likeness. But I also wonder if there are downsides to it that maybe we're not aware of or we don't talk enough about, because, we've already heard stories about athletes who have signed agreements and didn't realize that their future compensation, if they were to go pro, would be part of that agreement. Or we see kids chasing money now and not necessarily thinking about the education part of it, and who may graduate without ever getting their degree. So I wonder, from your standpoint, in terms of what you've seen, if there are cautionary tales that athletes should be aware of.
Sure. Up until today and continuing to move into the forward, I will continue to stress that the devils are in the details. With real and I'm a big believer in patience as a virtue. I love the opening remarks, because I think what was hit on was the uncertainty, a collective negotiation, and trying to restructure a system that's been in place for over a century. That takes time. It's not going to happen overnight. And to everything we've already hit on, to include all those other things outside of house, it's going to take some time, continued conversations with both sides of the table. And I think because of all the immediate reaction from January of 2021, at least on the commercial side, is that we don't take into account a lot of the things when it comes to the athlete. I've always said a lot of student athletes, amateur athletes, college athletes, they're all worried about what's going on with their counterpart in the locker next to them. And I think it draws the wrong reactions, and kids start to develop traits where they're worrying about the wrong things. And I always go back to keeping the main thing, especially on the commercial side, because I think a lot of college athletes and people don't understand this, is that there's only so much time in the day. So there are unintended consequences. They're 50% athlete and 15% student, right? So a professional athlete is 100% focused on their craft. So whatever deal you want to put in front of them, whether it's a real one, a fake one, a brand one, I mean, I think we also have a bad habit of labeling things, because no matter what it is, when an athlete has to perform services, whether it's going to class, getting on the field or on the court to play their sport, or performing a service that's part of one of the many agreements they've signed, they're putting in time, work, and effort. And that all adds up, and there are unintended consequences if we as adults are not managing that from a federal or state level, from an administrative level, from a locker room and coach standpoint, and from an agency standpoint, for the ones who do have agency representation, and even from a mom and dad and parent standpoint, making sure we're putting the best interests, not only for the athlete, but for our son, our brother, our grandson, our granddaughter, and our daughters.
I'm curious, when we talk about what you were just talking about, putting in time, responsibilities, expectations, all of that, and we have the NCAA seeking antitrust exemptions and whatnot, it would seem to me as a layperson, there would have to be some collective bargaining going on. And to do that, wouldn't the athletes need unionization to do that? And this doesn't appear to be a part of that. Am I wrong on that, any of you?
Yeah, I mean, listen, there's groups out there, whether you want to call them a trade association or a union, or, yes, they, at some point, at least I'm a believer that you have to have them on the other side to help enhance the conversation, so that their beliefs, their rights, their goals and ambitions are heard as well. Lori hit it great, where I've seen a lot of this stuff on Capitol Hill and all that. We need to make sure everyone's got a voice. You can't have a panel with 10 people and only one, athlete on the panel that's in a collegiate sport, or one that's played 5 years ago. We have to talk to the athletes that are sitting in the locker rooms now.
Guys have thoughts on that unionization?
Yeah, collective bargaining is certainly something picking up a lot of steam, even from, I think, sitting administrators. I think there's maybe they won't say it publicly, but I think many do privately believe, or at least know, that the end of the line here is some kind of collective bargaining. I think they would like that to be a non-employment version of collective bargaining. I don't know that exists.
I was going to say, can you have that?
But that's kind of what they want. And there was even thought that would be some kind of carve out of a special class in a bill. We haven't seen any movement on any of that. But the bottom line is, I do think there's more and more a belief that you need to get student athletes to the table to bargain, especially football and basketball, when you're talking about the money that is coming in, and the money that's going to go out and be distributed. That is it's certainly something that's more and more people are realizing.
But without, it's probably going to just lead to more litigation, and that's the unfortunate side.
Yeah, I think one of the things that Bob said is, this is worthy of more conversation, and you have to be patient. I think one of the biggest issues that I have with a package coming together, and by the way, I have not been called to help, shape this package, which that's a huge alarm, sets off huge alarms for me, because quite often when this legislation is being pulled together, I am the only woman athlete. I'm the only Division I woman athlete in the Congress. I'm definitely the only woman athlete at the table. And so, I always notice, if I'm not being called, that it's likely not something great for women or for athletes. So, but you're right. I mean, this warrants a lot of conversation. The reason why putting the employment exemption in there it's to kind of rush through and not have exhaustive conversations around how are we going to make sure that athletes are empowered and their collective voices at the table for health and safety reasons, fairness, whatever it might be. And I think it's when that, we're not being exhaustive of like, how are we going to mandate that those voices be at the table, right? You know, there's plenty of things, I guess on the NCAA, on the board, there's 2 athlete voices. Think of how daunting or overwhelming it would even be for an athlete to speak up for themselves when they're sitting across the table from their coach, their athletic director, their university president. I mean, you have to have sort of the collective voice of athletes so that that voice is equal to the folks that you're sitting across the table from. And that is not the conversation right now, that we're not talking about instituting that sort of, fixing that power imbalance today. And that's the one that we should be having. We should be debating that.
You know, what's interesting is the focus is on the Power 5 or Power 4 conferences. And I've spoken to athletic directors at, say, Division II schools or smaller universities with smaller athletic departments who really fear that if the settlement goes through, ultimately, they may end up losing their athletic departments simply because there won't be the funding for it. I wonder from you all's perspective, is that a real concern? And if so, what would it mean to the landscape going forward in terms of the opportunities for, student athletes that we see today?
Yeah, I mean, quickly on my end, I go back to uncertainty. I think everything's on the table until, that uncertainty starts to fade away. So I'm sure everyone's concerned about everything, whether it's the top Power 4 schools got their concerns and the D2 and D3 get, have their concerns as well. So I don't think anything's off the table right now.
Well, I think some of the schools, and you've seen one of them so far in Division I reclassify, St. Francis in Pennsylvania, I believe. And I think you'll see more reclassify out of Division I because they don't want to be a part of the settlement. They don't want to be a part of rev share, and they will go back to, an academic based, right, higher education, academic, amateur type of model. And I think a lot of that is when you look at the Howard AD said it very, I think, is you in Division I alone, right? You have huge gaps, budgetary gaps, financial gaps. In FBS, you have massive gaps. In the Power 4, you actually have pretty big financial gaps. And I think what the House settlement and rev share will do is it'll further grow those gaps and splinter Division I in FBS and potentially even the Power 4. And I think schools are going to have to make a decision. Do you want to play in this game, so to speak, this money game, or do you want to, go back to kind of how it was and be this sort of academic type of institution? And I think you have those decisions being made everywhere right now. And I think some schools realize that they could spend millions and millions of dollars and not really, at least from a championship perspective, not make any strides because their competition's spending millions more. And so I think there's a really deep conversation going on at a lot of schools of, do we want to do this? And I think you'll see more schools reclassify from Division I.
Yeah. Bob and I were talking yesterday, and one of the things that really struck me that I learned from him is that when a player, for instance, signs an NIL deal, there's this question of who holds their marketing rights, right? And Bob, if I explain this wrong, please correct me. But for instance, if I as an athlete sign an NIL deal through the university, let's say the collective, and there's a company that has my marketing rights, and philosophically, I disagree with what that company stands for, what happens then? Do I have to fulfill that contract? Can I get out of it? Is that valid, Bob, what I'm saying here?
Listen, I'm not a lawyer, but the more 30,000 foot is, right, the unintended consequences when an athlete is signing any agreement, and it's not being reviewed, or you don't have someone with institutional knowledge to read through that and at least explain to them what they're getting themselves into. Because at the end of the day, you know, as far as from the agency perspective, we've always put the pros, the cons, and laid it on the table, and then the family or the, you know, the team that's around that athlete will make the decision. But yeah, I mean, there, again, when I said earlier that the devil's in the details, there is so much in an agreement. It's going to be curious to see. Each school, I think, is looking at revenue share agreements differently. Some have collectives involved, some don't. Brand deals, you know, what you were alluding to is the assignment. You know, I've seen, you know, agencies have marketing agreements with their athletes. Are they exclusive? Does that conflict with what the rev share agreement is? Is the rev share agreement running through a collective? Is the collective assigning the rights to any of their brand partners or to their multimedia rights partners? So again, there's so many layers to this that, again, that uncertainty, even after the House settlement, is still going to be there until we get to a closer point of where the athletes actually have a say in how this will all work. And then you get more, you know, there is a pathway to get closer to the professional level per se, where there is a structure in place. Like I always emphasize, you know, I've been fortunate enough to be in the talent space for 25 plus years, and name, image, and likeness was there before I started working, and it's going to be well into that. It's like we're born with our name, image, and likeness. This is nothing new. It's just it's new to the collegiate space. So again, we're trying to transform an existing model into a space that's not used to it, and to a younger age group, and a broader base of families now that are taking a lot. It's overwhelming to go through this and explain this to folks. And I think, you know, from my seat, again, it goes back to making sure you're keeping the main thing. The main thing is it to play sports, is it to get an education, and explain all the ramifications that come along with that when it starts to get commercially monetized. So yeah, it's layered. It's uncertain. It's confusing, and you know, I can only recommend to athletes, you know, on the collegiate level, to make sure that you have someone with institutional knowledge when you get to the significant numbers, that you're not giving your rights away, that you're not assigning them to the wrong groups. You know, you still want to have a say in what you're doing, and control as much as you can control as it relates to your name, image, and likeness.
Yeah, before I open it up for questions, I just wanted to ask all of you, are you encouraged by what's happening now? And particularly, Congresswoman, you as a former Division I athlete, and you look at where this is going, and the strides that we have seen women athletes make. Are you all encouraged in terms of the landscape of where we're going?
Yeah, college sports has never been more exciting than it is right now. It is, it's an incredible product across men and women and across, you know, all sports. And I think we should remember that, you know, viewership, fans, it's all up. It's all going in the right direction. People love watching college sports now today more than ever in my lifetime. And so that's a great thing. So that is encouraging to me when I think about the product just keeps getting better and better. And yes, there is a Wild West component. There is, you know, transfer portals that are, you know, we got to deal with. Do I think that that's Congress's role? I think that would be Congress micromanaging college athletics. And so there are other places where we need to, you know, sort of help guide or make it facilitate like a standard across states because it's cumbersome. Yes. But I think we have to be really thoughtful about what guardrails we put up and where we're closing off opportunity for athletes to be more empowered. And so that's sort of how I think about it. But hell yeah, I mean, like college sports it's as exciting as it's ever been. And people love college sports. I mean, most people do not think how we're talking about, you know, what's happening today. They're just turning on the TV, which now they can see many more women's sports on TV. And that's only going to improve with the next, you know, TV deal on the horizon. And they're just thinking, oh my gosh, like my two young daughters, they only fill out the March Madness bracket for women. Like that is awesome. I mean, that was not done, you know, 10 years ago even. I mean, that is incredible progress for us. So I am encouraged. I'm optimistic. Yes, we have to figure things out. I do think we need to be patient and really thoughtful, because I think rushing it is only going to hurt the progress athletes have made.
Either of you want to touch on that?
Well, I mean, I think like the Congresswoman said, it is an exciting time in college athletics. I mean, viewership numbers have never been higher, you know, attendance numbers that kind of dipped a few years ago in football are coming back, you know, I mean, post-COVID. So it is an exciting time. I think one of the things that concerns me and a lot of people is what you actually saw this year in the NCAA basketball tournament. The men's tournament specifically was you had for the first time ever, I believe, only power conference schools represented in the Sweet 16. And there's a fear that all of this, the rev share and just the money in general, will, like I said earlier, will continue to grow the gaps to a point where you'll see it on the field and on the court. Like that is a good example where the Cinderellas may not be there anymore as much. And I think for sports outside of football, where you always had the little guys and Cinderellas, the great stories, I fear that we're not going to be hearing or seeing as much of that. And so that's one of the issues with all of this. It's kind of unfortunate. It doesn't necessarily have to be that way, but it's organically, probably because of the money and the revenue share, I think it's organically going to happen.
Bob, you have any thoughts?
Yeah, listen, I love it. It's if you're a pro athlete, pro player, it couldn't be a better time to be involved in college athletics. Yeah, maybe I don't like Wild Wild West. I don't like I just think it's uncertain. But shoot, now that they can, you see so many more college athletes' personalities come out because they can market themselves. They can enhance their visibility on social media. They can be in a TV campaign or do some radio reads or what have you. I think the transfer portal, it does need to be fixed because I think it gets away from the educational side of it. But from a business side, alumni bases couldn't be any higher because of that competition. You know, there's this hero villain mentality that's created, which is spiked TV ratings. So listen, I've watched more college softball and female college basketball. I mean, I have a daughter. There's a whole nother conversation we have as far as what's actually a competitive sport. She was in competitive cheer from 7 years old. And there's that whole argument of, is it a sport? Is it not a sport? But yeah, I mean, college sports is awesome right now. And, you know, again, we shouldn't take it for granted though, and make sure that we fix it and make it something that's sustainable.
Great. Julie, do we want to open it up for questions now? Okay. I didn't know if we had mics anywhere for the audience. Oh, okay. Does anyone have any questions? If you could raise your hand and state your name and affiliation. We have one back here, please.
Hello, I'd like to ask a question about athlete representation, and I agree with you all 100% in theory. The question is in practice, and for me, the closest analog would be the players' associations of the NFL and NBA. And although the average tenure of those pro athletes is approximately a college career, right, about 4 years, they have veterans who can form the leadership to really be most directly involved in negotiations. How can you imagine that one might have a leadership that could be leading bargaining with the presidents, athletic directors, et cetera? Thank you.
You're looking at me. How about you? Now you're gonna take this one? That certainly is the leadership of any kind of union or players association in college is an issue. I think Bob mentioned earlier, there's a bunch of groups right now, probably 3, maybe 4 that are angling to become the college player, a college players association. And you know, they have leadership, they have older players on their like leadership boards and all that. I mean, that would be the easy answer, right? Is you cycle each cycle. You have a player rep, you have older player reps, maybe seniors who kind of lead some kind of unionization or players association. In fact, the House settlement, you know, future athletes for the next 10 years are all included in the House settlement. They become a class member, and there are class representatives. So it's kind of built almost like it would be a union. There are class reps, and each year there'll be new kind of class reps added, leadership, in a leadership position. So you could do it that way, but there's no doubt a college players association and how it would be constructed is probably one of the issues with collective bargaining and unionization, is just how it would be structured when you have 18 to 22-year-olds, right, instead of 24 to 40-year-olds or something in pro sports.
Ross, am I correct in my interpretation of it that Judge Wilkin also said she was concerned that incoming athletes would need the opportunity to basically say they, excuse me, they don't want to be included.
Yeah.
As part of that. And she wanted them to address that as well. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah. There, aside from the roster limits, that was really the only other objection that she really entertained, was that you're basically, and she kept using the analogy of the 10-year-old playing kickball, right, is a part of this class right now. If they go to college, they're part of this class. Is that right? And I think that what's going to happen is she asked the power conferences and the NCAA to go back and adjust language in the settlement where you're not, the future athletes are not part of the class until they get a chance to object. They can't opt out of the class. They're already pretty much in, but they have an opportunity to object to the settlement. And there would be, if the objection is good enough, the judge deems it good enough, they'll have a hearing like they did Monday. And so that they'll change a little language there. That one's not as significant of an issue as the roster limits, but those are really the only two ones that she identified, which is surprising, Congresswoman. Any Title IX issue she waived off as basically as you got to file a separate lawsuit on that, which plenty of lawsuits will be filed on July 2nd, a day after. I'm sure they're already drafted. But she waived off that. She waived off the anti-competitive nature of the cap, just having a cap. She waived off that. She pushed aside any fears of the booster regulations, the third-party NIL. She didn't care about any of that. It was a little surprising that she identified the roster limits in the future athletes as really the only two issues, I think. But that's what she did.
As someone who's covered the NFL the last 3 decades, it sure felt a lot like professional sports in terms of the way that she was viewing it and whatnot. So this, as you were referring to earlier, this image of amateurism, it just doesn't apply. It does, at least from my perspective, doesn't apply anymore. So
It hasn't existed for a long time.
exactly. Over here, and then we have one in the back here. Oh, I'm sorry. Did someone else? I'm sorry. You have the microphone. Yes.
Hi, everyone. My name is Leah Brown. I'm a sophomore sport management student at Delaware State University. And I just wanted to ask the panelists, as somebody who is looking to go into college sports and being an administrator in the college sports landscape, what are some trends and resources that I can use to kind of prepare myself for a career in an area where there's so much uncertainty and so many questions in the future?
Change your career.
No.
I'm kidding. Of course. Yeah. I'm kidding. I talk to ADs every day, multiple of them. It's, they'll describe it as a chaotic time, obviously, and what they're dealing with. The role has changed and it's continuing to change. I think it depends on what school and what conference and level that you are, right? The Howard athletic director role is a lot different, like you said, than Ward Manuel at Michigan, the Michigan athletic director role. So I think it depends on where you're at, but at the highest levels, I think it is becoming more professional, professionalized. So studying professional organizations and executives at professional organizations is probably a good start. A lot of power conference schools are hiring general managers for sports. So it is just becoming more commercialized, professionalized. So I think for any young person that wants a career in athletic administration, keeping up with as much as you can is always important, but also studying the professional ranks in NFL, MLB, NBA, WNBA, all those and how they work, because that's what it's transforming into.
Yeah, I would just say, I struggle with that as well. I mean, I think news is breaking, like every day, that's shaping the future of college sports. And so I find myself listening to, podcasts, like reading the sports pages more than ever. Because one, the rise of women's sports, look, the rise in sports in general. I mean, I went back to my alma mater, which is Georgetown. There's now 3 levels of sports offered on campus, right? There's the Division I, intercollegiate sports, but there's intercollegiate club sports now. And there's also, intramural sports. And like that, I mean, all rosters are full, people are clamoring to keep playing, if that is like, it's part of our culture. Sports is part of our culture. Like there's plenty written, and there's a lot of big thinking around how the future of college sports can look. And so I think it's exciting to be a part of that. I think a lot is going to change in the next 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. I think it's a great career for a young woman to have, to help shape how it continues to be a part of our campuses, how we still nurture and grow the next generation of women athletes, which has, never been stronger because of the rise of women in college sports. And so kind of keeping that as your focal point and just following all of the news that's sort of happening, I think it's exciting.
Okay, let's go over here and then we're back there.
Hi, Mike Kavanaugh, independent researcher. Question for the Congresswoman. Great to have a Hoya perspective. I was there before you were born, but nonetheless. The NIL is great. It was long overdue. Maybe the best thing about it is that students aren't paying for it. And the question is that going to change? Hopefully it won't. We already have very substantial losses being covered by students and their families at the majority of programs. University of Massachusetts, for example, loses between $35 and $45 million every year. We certainly don't want to make that higher. Maybe we also want to make that lower. And what kind of discussion of those issues fits into the congressional hearings at this time?
So you're talking about the loss when kids are in bad deals, or I just want to understand the question a
Well,
little bit better.
that the athletic department as a whole loses, in example of university.
I see.
35 to 45 million. There are a number of schools that lose more than that. Which is a lot of money.
Yeah. I think I have it now. And you tell me if I don't by my answer. So one of the things that we saw with the rise of collectives, for example, is there's now this bypass of money that used to come to the university and be subject to Title IX, right? Boosters used to give money to athletic departments. That was governed by Title IX. Now we're seeing, a lot of money going to collectives. There is no rules regulating how that money gets distributed to men versus women. One of the provisions in our College Economic Freedom Act, which addresses, we have some standards, or the Title IX applies to collectives. Now, is that going to solve it all? No, I think there's a lot of debate on how collectives should be regulated. But for me, I want to make sure that if there is money that used to come to the university no longer, that women don't get shortchanged in that debate. And I think that that is something that, again, Bob made the point earlier, we have to be exhaustive in how we think about that, and rushing something through actually won't set these universities or these athletes up for success going forward.
Back here, please.
Hello, my name is Cedric. I'm with the
Vote.
CKA Save
vote?
Project.
Okay, we'll get 'em
I was
done.
reading an
Go ahead.
article or
Hold on one sec. Cedric.
You know
I'm
what? I
sorry.
don't want to be rude. They just called votes. So I'm gonna scoot, but thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Cedric. Go ahead, please.
Can I use that excuse too? They called votes.
yes, I'm here with the CKA Save Project. And my question is, I was reading in an article that some students who are receiving NIL deals in college now could possibly impact their potential earnings if they were to go pro. I was trying to see if there's some credibility to that, or anybody know about that and can expound upon what I was reading?
Terminate on it?
Hmm?
There we go.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it goes back to what I alluded to earlier as it relates to the uncertainty or the unintended consequences when an athlete in the collegiate space signs an agreement and they don't necessarily know what they're signing onto. Whether it's giving up rights in specific categories commercially, whether it's allowing the group that they've done an agreement with to assign those rights elsewhere. I mean, to give you I guess maybe an easy example, a college athlete right now could potentially sign a deal with multiple different groups, whether it's the college, the collective, a marketing agency, a marketing rep group that may cover trading cards to go against whatever guarantee they're giving him at the collective, at the agency, which could go into the future. If that's a top lottery pick in basketball or a top pick in the NFL, that deal could potentially worth more than the actual guarantee or collective agreement they signed. So again, athletes need to be cautious and make sure, folks with knowledge and expertise in this space are looking at anything they put their signature on.
And I just wanted to add one more. Is that connected somehow? Because I know Jaden Daniels, he refused some of his NIL deals because he was knew he was going to be a top draft pick. Is that kind of correlated to what you're saying, potentially?
No, I listen, I think that's more in the category of being smart, selective, and the power of no. Which we can, again, that's where I think that the whole third party Deloitte Touche clearinghouse is very subjective and is going to have some issues moving forward because you're worth what someone's going to pay you. You can get into the brass tactics of, what the value is for certain services, but as long as an athlete's going to say no, because that's in their best interest. I don't know if that played into, it was more of him probably being smart and selective of saying, hey, I'm going to wait and not do a deal now because I think I'm going to bet on myself. And once I get to the pros, my value is going to go up a lot further.
Thank you.
We have one. Oh, I'm sorry. There's a mic right there and then we can come right here when the mic. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see the minute. We'll go 3, 1, 2, 3. How's that? We got you in the back. We're going to come to you. Thank you.
Hi, all. My name's Ellie. I'm a recent graduate from Princeton where I swam all 5 years. I've got a question for you guys about how to get student athletes to the table at the NCAA at the system-wide level. How do we practically bring student athlete voices up? And how do we specifically get Olympic sports to the bargaining table, especially when Olympic sports like the sport of swimming don't tend to have a lot of financial leverage?
Well, one of the things that's part of the House settlement is the remaking of the NCAA governance model. And they're in the process of meeting about that. I think they've had 2 or 3 meetings and they'll have probably 2 or 3 more. And one of the big topics in those meetings is remaking the Division I Board of Governors and having more athletes be a part of they're not just the board of governors, but even some of the boards and committees underneath. So that's in the process, from what I understand, of happening, of getting more athletes on those boards. You know, they do have SAC right now, obviously, but the role there is probably a little limited. So I think they are in the process of adding more athletes to these governing boards and committees. You know, as far as the big sports and getting like football, basketball players involved, what I've found is football and basketball players, and I think Bob mentioned it earlier, right? They have their duties in school, right? And they have their sports duties and practices and games. And now they have NIL and activations and all this responsibility. Is that it gets so full, none of them want to do this. None of them want to be right on these committees and boards. They don't have time, or they just don't want to do it. So that is a problem. But hopefully as we move into this era where they're actually directly getting money from schools, right, that may even be a requirement to be involved, right, to be involved in some way.
Okay, we had one here and back, and then to the back.
Real quick, Rob Smith, Youth Sports Collaborative Network. Given all the athletic departments of the big schools is getting more like a business, shouldn't they lose their nonprofit status and just be treated as a business and pay taxes and be treated as such? If they're not going to be part of the true educational process, why should they be a nonprofit? What are they doing? Clearly, they're helping their athletes, but I don't see the greater good coming out of this.
Probably one of the things why they don't want employment, college athlete employment, I would say, is that there's a fear that there could be a loss of that. But Bob, if you want to.
Yeah, it's above my pay grade. Listen, that's a tough question. Listen, I think that there are also, and I'm not sure if this is going to answer your question or not, but I think there's a lot of good that also comes out from an educational standpoint of the athletes who do play sports and that are on a team and in a locker room. So when folks say that, you know, it's going professional and we've lost sight of the education, listen, I've always wondered why kids who are on teams, especially now, don't get credits for actually playing a sport. I mean, all these coaches go and teach classes to other students, right? The advances that have been made within the affiliate facilities they work in, with NIL, the financial literacy classes they need to take, and being taught how to manage a checkbook or their bank account, the health and wellness services that are now provided to them. From a recovery standpoint, from an eating standpoint, the educational value alone playing a sport now in college, those life skills are tough to teach in a classroom. So I wouldn't necessarily dismiss the education value you get from actually playing a sport and being part of a team.
Okay,
I'm not saying, I'm just saying just in general, I think that there's education value when you're playing a sport. Again, the other stuff about the nonprofit, the profit, that's a whole nother conversation.
right, we got to wrap it up, but I promise a question to the gentleman in the back. We'll end on that.
How you doing? My name is Alex Brown for CKA Saves. I guess my question is, like, if you're here, you probably view college sports differently than the average fan, but just read the narrative, or how do you switch the narrative that somehow these 17 to 22-year-old students are ruining college sports, that they're the greedy monsters all of a sudden, when now it's all of a sudden the Wild Wild West and it's lawlessness when no one had a problem with it. So how did the narrative change so quickly?
Yeah, it's money. I think money changes the narrative so often. I think this is right. You look at what's happened over the years with pay increases in coaches and administrators, and the budgets have ballooned from TV money. And so the narrative for so long was the coaches, administrators are getting paid all this money. You know, they're the bad guys, right? And we have seen in the NIL era, we have seen the pendulum kind of swing, I guess, so to speak. You know, I don't know how this new kind of house settlement, this rev share is going to change the narrative, but there is hope from people that, can you find a middle ground between these two things? Like, you know, can everybody get enough money, enough compensation, enough benefits? I don't know. I don't know if we're gonna ever get there.
Can I say this real quick from a journalist standpoint? I think we have an incredible role to play in that in terms of how we present it. And I think as we get younger people into the pipeline and into decision-making positions and who come from different cultural and life experience backgrounds into these positions to determine how stories are being covered and who's covering them and what the narratives will be, I think that will help change it. I think right now, just personally speaking, you still have that sort of old guard in place that is used to one model. And I think sometimes they're slow to change how things are viewed. So that's just one
Yeah,
one
it's gonna
perspective.
take time. I'm with you. I mean, a D1 basketball player jumps in the portal. He's a trader, he's this and that, and the coach makes a change for more money. It's all cool. He
Yeah.
brings 5 guys with him and it's all kosher. So it's just, again, it's like I said, patience is a virtue. I think it's just going to take time for all of us to adjust to the new norms or what will be the new norms. And then, I think, like you said, reporting will change on it.
Well, and things will, like, that's a good example, right? Coach leaves, player leaves, there's a
Yeah.
different kind of, right, narrative out there. Well, the House settlement is supposed to have player contracts, right? Coach leaves, the school that he's going to has got to play a buyout. And soon we're going to see the school that a player's going to is going to have to play a buyout too. So we're going to see the field level in some way. I don't know if it'll change the narrative, but we will see that.
But I think all you have to do too is go out in the public and see how young people view what is happening and how they view athletes being paid now and how they view it as such a good thing and whatnot. And then you have the older population that says, man, they're ruining college sports, right? So it's all about perspective as I see it, at least in terms of the people I talk to. With that, we have to close it. So I thank you all for being here, and I thank you all for allowing me to moderate such bright and intelligent folks up here. Learned a lot. So thank you.
Thank you, Jim, Ross, Bob. That was a fantastic panel. We'll be back. We have a 15-minute break. We'll start the second panel promptly at 10:30.
Yeah. Yeah.